take what seats are available. We're going to start. Good evening. Welcome to the San Carlos City Council Successor Agency to the Redevelopment Agency and Housing Authority special meeting. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin, I would like to first request that we do something a little bit out of order, if my fellow council members have no objection. What I would like to do after public comment is move item 5A after item 4A. Anybody have any objection to that? Okay, thank you. Now, before we start, we had a press conference last night, and not much of it was broadcast. And what I would like to do is sort of say what I said last night, just reconstituted for this meeting, because tonight's meeting is being televised, and many people could not hear those comments. The events of the last few weeks surrounding the coronavirus outbreak have been unsettling for all of us. Families, businesses, and daily lives have been disrupted, and tragically, lives have been lost. The official response by the federal and state governments is unfolding at a rapid pace, and the impacts are being felt across California and the country. It was highly unexpected when city staff was notified that passengers aboard the Grand Princess cruise ship would be housed in San Carlos while receiving care to help them weather their infections and eventually return to their homes. San Carlos did not seek out this role. Nevertheless, we find ourselves in the position of temporarily housing those who are sick, stranded far from home, and isolated. And so it is our duty, not only as San Carlans, but as fellow human beings and as Americans, to embrace our core values of fostering a safe and welcoming community. If this was happening to me or a member of my family, I would hope the community we traveled to would be equally as welcoming to us. We recognize that a worldwide pandemic is a frightening event. We understand and respect our community members' concerns, and it is important for everyone to know that federal and state plan prioritizes not only the safety and well-being of those who have tested positive and who will be housed here for care, but also our residents and our neighboring communities. We want to assure you that every measure is being taken by the responsible agencies to secure the site so there is no contamination or spread of the virus from this location. As your city officials, we pledge to protect our community as we assume a role assigned to us by state and federal governments to provide shelter and a safe haven for those currently in a much less fortunate situation than we. San Carlos is a welcoming and inclusive community, and we value family, diversity, safety, and community. The city will share information and updates with the community in a timely manner as appropriate while respecting the privacy of those who are recovering. This situation with the coronavirus is dynamic. We ask the public to please check the city's website, cityofsancarlos.org, regularly for updates, and more were published today. There are at least 7 press releases that you can find from the homepage of our webpage. Everyone is encouraged to heed the advice of San Mateo County Department of Health and the CDC to stay healthy and reduce the risk of infection. These are difficult times, and I am confident that we will get through this together. Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to public comment. Any persons wishing to address the council for an item that is not on tonight's agenda are welcome to do so, and I'm looking to see if we have them. We do not have any items. Anyone who wants to speak on items that are not on our agenda, is there anyone who would like to speak at this time? Okay. All right. At this point, we are going to move on to item 4A. This is a consideration of adopting a resolution ratifying and extending the proclamation of the existence of a local emergency caused by the threat of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, in the relocation of COVID-19 persons and patients into the city issued by the Director of Emergency Services, and authorizing extension of the existence of a local emergency. I believe we are going to have a report by our city attorney, Greg Rubens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before you on this item tonight is an extension and ratification of the proclamation of emergency issued by the city manager on March 10th, just a few days ago. It seems like a long time since that happened. The city manager made that determination based upon information that he received that day about the relocation of the patients from that were formerly on the Princess cruise ship that was docked. It's docked at Oakland, and the patients had initially been transferred off of the vessel and being taken for evaluation to Travis Air Force Base. The whole operation everyone should know is a federal operation that's being done in conjunction with the state. And so San Carlos, in response to that, under the law, we're allowed to enact a proclaim a local emergency to deal with the local impacts of those facts. And then what it enables us to do is to receive resources from higher levels of government, from the county, from the state, and from the federal government, depending on which agency has also declared an emergency. Now, in this case, the county declared an emergency, and the governor declared an emergency. And the governor's emergency was on March 4th. And his proclamation deals with the general effects of the COVID-19 virus. And then ours was, although triggered by the relocation of the patients, also includes the elements of how the COVID virus might affect our local community. So under the government code, the city manager's proclamation can only last 7 days, and so we're only 2 days into those 7 days. And then from there, the city council can extend the state of emergency for 2 months under state law. Under an executive order issued by the governor today, the 60-day limit has been lifted until the governor lifts his declaration of emergency. So when you adopt the declaration of emergency tonight, you actually have a choice that's different than the resolution. You can make it coterminous with the state's declaration of emergency, or you could choose to review it in 60 days as it's drafted. So in the staff report, you can see a lot of the reasons and findings for the declaration of emergency, and some of them the mayor talked about a minute ago. And also the city manager on the 10th, actually before we heard about the patients being transferred in response to the COVID virus, decided to take measures in response to the governor's declaration of emergency that's in your packet at page 5. And the city manager closed the Adult Community Center through April, canceled all private events at city facilities through April, canceled youth center programming, although the drop-in program continued, and maintained the sport league's activities, but closed. But we'll be revisiting that if the schools make a decision on activities on their campuses, and then canceled all non-essential commission meetings and subcommittee meetings. So what's before you is the resolution that would ratify and extend the proclamation of the existence of a local emergency. And again, the purposes are to the extent that there are resources available and reimbursements for the city, this will enable us to seek reimbursement of the costs that the city has incurred, and it will also authorize the city manager to continue to have emergency powers that are listed in our municipal code to take steps to protect the city. An example of that might be to sign contracts that he thinks are necessary to protect the residents. So with that, I'm available to answer any questions you have about the proposed ratification and extension, if you will. Thank you.
Yes, Mark, you wanted to ask, you had questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also have a question at the end for my colleagues, just so I understand things a little bit better. Greg, the scope of what we could include in this resolution, because I noticed that there are some ... areas for where we could add stuff. What statutory authority do we have to deal with, for example, commercial-related things like hoarding activities or price gouging, or is that managed and overseen by a different branch of government, a different level of government?
Yeah, this is a different reso than the one I think you're thinking of. This is the one that's in the staff report. This one is complete. The one that you're reviewing now is complete. But as far as that question about price gouging, the governor's declaration of emergency actually covered that issue and deals with price gouging on medical supplies and supplies that are needed to respond to the coronavirus.
So we would not, when we get to that, we would not have to consider taking action independently for that. Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Laura?
Thank you, Mayor Collins. Thank you for the report. I appreciate it. With respect to the resources that could be realized, what do you expect that those might be used for? So in other words, what would we need to be reimbursed for? What do you anticipate?
Well, I think the city manager, primarily it's the time of the staff responding to the crisis. We're all keeping track of our time in the EOC. In dealing with this, I think the city manager, and he can correct me on this, has obtained some services to assist the city, but I don't really have those at my fingertips here, what we've spent that on. But it's primarily, so far anyway, it's primarily been expenses that we've had to incur in responding to the emergency.
Great, thank you. And then my next question is, with respect to the time duration of the state of emergency, you had mentioned that we could do it in parallel to what the governor has done or keep it at the 60 days. Do we have an understanding of how long we think the state of emergency at the state level will be in play?
Well, I don't. I mean, anecdotally, they're in the executive order that deals with the price gouging, he did limit that to September. So it could be 6 months or so. It could be longer if the impacts continue to grow as they have been. And it's just going to depend on how the facts play out, I think. Does not have an expiration. The governor's does not have an expiration date.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Adam. Oh.
Thank you. I did have one quick question. Greg, can you just clarify, you mentioned that we could do, just to follow up on what Laura mentioned, we could do the 60 days, which is sort of what's there, or coincide. Is there something in between? Could we pick an arbitrary number that says 90 or 120? Or does it have to, are there only those two choices?
You could probably do it, yeah, as long as it expires before the governor's does, we'd be okay. But I don't think, basically under the law, and I've been through a few of these before, and the 60-day is designed, that's in state law, is designed to require the council to review the state of the emergency to see if it needs to be continued or if it could be terminated. And that's because a lot of times these states of emergency, the facts change. And then there's also in the law that a provision that the city council or any governing body is supposed to look at that and end the emergency as soon as possible because of the extraordinary powers that are granted in it. The governor, I think, realized in his order that this is kind of a different type of an emergency, that he doesn't know when it's going to end, and he doesn't want to have, just when I read it from my perspective as a city attorney, I read it and he does not want to have a city inadvertently not extend or do something like that. He just wants to make sure that everybody who decides they have a local emergency can continue it while the state is there.
And
I was just going to add, so if you were to do something like that, I think the language would be that you would adopt it in conjunction with the governor's order, or 90 days, whatever you're thinking. And then you would have the words, whichever came sooner. So if the governor's expired sooner, that's when yours would expire. If 90 days was the sooner to arrive, that's when it would have to come back for review.
And is there any particular value with, are there things that at the 60-day point, if we went with that we could, if we felt there were additional actions we needed to take that would allow us to review and do that? Or can we make changes to the emergency order if we needed to call it up, if something changed, something happened, we had a natural disaster on top of it? Not that I'm...
I think what we've done in the past in similar circumstances is the staff reports to you regularly at council meetings. So, but in answer to your question, if there's some particular additional action or ratification of or an action that the city manager would like to seek your guidance on, we would bring that to you.
Regardless of the timing?
Regardless of the timing.
Thank you.
Laura, another question.
So just to continue to build on this line of questioning, Jeff, you had mentioned that we could craft the language such that it would be whichever one was sooner. Would there also be value in maybe looking at the alternative, which is whichever one is longer?
I don't know that there's a lot of additional value in that. I think as we'll see tonight, this isn't an overly complex action for the council. It's not overly burdensome for us to bring it back to you to be able to make changes and adjustments. And as the city attorney pointed out, if circumstances changed and we felt like it was in the benefit of the community's interest in terms of health and safety and making modifications here, we would want to do that with the council sooner rather than later.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to make sure I missed something in your explanation, Greg. Could we not craft it so that it was coterminous with the governor's declaration of emergency, but then if there were some local condition that led us to believe we could terminate it early, simply have a council action to terminate it early? In other words, we don't have to put a defined shot clock in it other than to say it's coterminous with the governor's.
You do not have to put a shot clock, and you always have the option of terminating your local emergency.
For my colleagues' benefit, to me, I'm not trying to forestall the discussion, but it seems like that gives us the most flexibility because it says that as the situation evolves, we can end it at any time we need to. We can't extend it beyond what the governor's thing goes anyway, so why not do that?
I'm comfortable with that.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, just to be clear, it would basically just be flexible to coincide with whatever comes out of Sacramento. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I do not have any speaker cards for this. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak?
Eric Lamoureux with Cal OES, having a conversation with our chief counsel right now, and I think the action you're prepared to take will certainly be appropriate, and there is a provision in the governor's state of emergency to waive the provision of having to continually extend your proclamation.
Okay. I apologize. We do have people watching on TV. They may be interested to know who you are, so if you could just tell us again.
Eric Lamoureux, Assistant Director of Response for Cal OES.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I don't see anyone.
Mayor?
Yes.
Through the chair, if I may invoke the Gracilli rule for a second for the benefit of people listening. Cal OES is the California Office of Emergency Services.
Thank you. Okay, I do not see any other speaker cards. Unless there's any other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution 2020-13. A resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos ratifying and extending the proclamation of the existence of a local emergency caused by the threat of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, and the relocation of COVID-19 persons and patients into the city issued by the Director of Emergency Services and authorizing an extension of the existence of a local emergency, the duration of which to coincide with the Governor's declaration.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Palmer Lohan?
Yes.
Councilmember Rack?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, as we previously agreed, we are going to move for the moment to item 5B. We will come back to 4B. This is a report to council. It's just updates on Key City project, but this is to receive an update from government officials on the status of COVID-19 plans affecting San Carlos and council decisions, and I believe that we're going to get comments first from our city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Jeff Maltby, San Carlos City Manager. First, I'd like to just start by thanking the many federal, state, county, and city officials we have been working with on this. The support we've received in our community has been outstanding. I know folks are burning the candle at both ends to get the job done, and we certainly appreciate that and want to support you in your efforts in every way we can. Here in San Carlos. I would next like to give my sincere thank you and gratitude to the members of our community, so many of which have reached out to us with offers of support and assistance. This is a community that I've said time and time again has just always blown me away in terms of their willingness to roll up their sleeves and volunteer. There isn't really a role at this time for the community to play, but we're looking at a number of things. We're keeping a hold of those offers and well wishes, and we're going to try to find something positive to do with them. But that level of support and understanding that we're getting from this community has just really been remarkable and blown us away, and we're sharing that with the first responders and the medical folks who are out in the community at this site and just working, within the industry on this emergency as we receive them. So thank you very much for that. There's a lot of information to go through here tonight. We're gonna, I will be in some ways rushing. We've got a lot of folks who've been brought in from the field and their posts in the EOC for this meeting tonight, and we'd like to make sure we get this information out there to the public and to our elected officials, and then get those folks back to their posts in helping to work this public health emergency that we're dealing with right now. So I'm going to start a little bit with the frequently asked questions, our FAQ list that's available on our website. These are the most common questions that we're getting from members of our community, starting with why was San Carlos chosen to host the passengers from the Grand Princess, some of the passengers from the Grand Princess who are dealing with the potential impacts of potentially having the coronavirus. I can tell you what I know, which is that the owner of the hotel had reached out to the state offering the facility, his hotel, for this purpose. The city was not notified that this was happening. We were not asked. We did not approve it. We did not have a role to play. We were notified that this was happening, what the plan was, and what, if any, our role in it, which is our role really is just to try to make sure that the information from the state and the federal government is flowing to our community about this. We're not running the hotel. We're not providing those health care services or involved in that response directly in any way. So that answers the second question. Why did the city agree to this? We did not agree. We didn't disagree. We were not involved in that process. This happened at other levels of government outside of the city's control. The governor, the president of the United States, all the associated healthcare agencies have emergency powers of their own. Those have been called into play, and this has been the result that we're working with right now. That being said, I echo the sentiments, and I know our city staff echoes the sentiments of the mayor. In the long tradition of this city, when you've been given lemons here in San Carlos, we have a proud and glorious history of making the best lemonade there is. So we want these folks, these poor people that were bobbing out in the Pacific Ocean for the last couple of weeks on a cruise ship and then stuck at the port in Oakland, to know that while we're sorry we didn't invite them, now that they're here, they are part of our community in San Carlos. That's how we feel about them. That said, they are in isolation. There is a fence around the property. The U.S. Marshals are responsible for securing the site. Those folks are not going to be in downtown Laurel Street having dinner. They are stuck in that hotel until they pass the testing procedures, and we have some folks here from the state and the federal government who can explain the testing procedures and the medical side of this far better than I can, who can explain all those different protections that are in place for the passengers of the ship who've been exposed or potentially exposed to the coronavirus. There is no hotel staff at the hotel. The hotel staff has been put on paid vacation, and the hotel's being staffed by federal medical support employees. The hotel folks are not there and will not have had any contact with these folks who are going to be staying in the hotel receiving any sort of treatment. Another common question we've got from the public was, why aren't these people staying on the military base? I think others can speak to that later in the presentation, but the short answer is there are Department of Defense rules where 6 civilians can't stay on a military base because a military base is part of our first line defense, and we don't want to have that contamination under Department of Defense rules. But they can explain the process. It's a rather complex one in terms of how these folks are getting bounced around and who exactly ends up potentially being at the Fairfield Inn here in San Carlos for an extended stay. How long will people be staying in the hotel? It sounds like it could be 14 days for any particular individual. We were told 30 days, but that seems to be potentially changing depending on how quickly people are taken off the ship or what else begins to develop and what other needs arise in terms of folks that have been affected and need to be put into this type of quarantine situation. We don't have a number on how many people will be receiving treatment at the Fairfield Inn or staying there. We know there's 120 rooms. Some of the folks coming off the cruise ship, we've been told, are couples, so they'll be staying together. So there could be some rooms that have 2 people, couples staying in them. Others maybe have a single occupant. Currently, there are 7 people at the hotel under quarantine. What steps are being taken to protect the city of San Carlos and the community? All persons that are providing medical care in the facility will be observing proper sanitation practices, wearing their protective gear, all those things that you would see in any hospital situation. We have health workers, doctors, nurses, clinicians who live in our community and work in the medical field every day that deal with patients who are suffering from far more contagious and dangerous diseases than the coronavirus. Tuberculosis is an example. So these health providers will be using all the same health practices and preventive measures when they're working with these patients that they would be in any medical environment to make sure that when they leave and they go home that they're not bringing anything with them and infecting their family and loved ones or spreading it throughout our community. And again, there are medical professionals here this evening who could speak to that far better than I can, but we've been impressed with the medical planning associated with this event and the level of professionalism and detail that we've come across so far as this has unfolded. So if I can begin to switch gears a little bit, and there will be more from the state and the federal government about the specific to the Fairfield Inn and what's happening there. What we were dealing with here in San Carlos before we got notification that our city was going to be playing host to this field hospital, we were working on the following and have continued to work on the following. The San Mateo County health officials made several recommendations that have helped guide our decision-making and our thinking on this issue, and I'd like to share those with you. The health officials recommended that we cancel all non-essential functions and gatherings within our community, maintain a distance of 6 feet from other individuals. Our unique seating arrangement tonight as we grapple with how do you have a public meeting in an era where we're telling people don't have public gatherings. This is our best and first attempt at it. Stop shaking hands with folks. A lot of elbow bumping how or head nodding or just a nice hearty hello. Increase the amount of remote working to the extent possible. We see that within government, and also we're getting word that there's a lot of that happening in the private sector, and I think if you've driven during normal commute hours this week, you can tell that it seems to be working. Those over the age of 60 and those with comorbid conditions should avoid gatherings. No group events or gatherings of more than 250 people. So these are some of the things that help guide us in our thinking as we begin to look at our city actions that we'll now discuss. Closures and cancellations through April, where we've closed our adult community center and canceled all associated events, trips, and other programming. All private event rentals in city facilities have been canceled through April. All youth center, spring break, and senior activities have been canceled. The youth center is closing beginning Monday, March 16th. We have we've canceled adult and youth organized sports through April, and we are closing all the neighborhood parks. Those are the pocket parks, the mini parks that just have tiny little playgrounds and really nothing else in them. In our larger community parks, the playgrounds will be closed and receive a deep cleaning while they are closed and secured, and our public restrooms in the parks will also be closed. The parks themselves will remain open, the trail system will remain open, but without public restrooms, we ask you, the members of the public, to be aware of that and plan ahead if you'll be using those facilities. The dog park will also be closed beginning tomorrow. All non-essential commission and subcommittee meetings will be canceled with the community. This will be an item that continues to evolve as we have essential items that we need commissions and subcommittees to work on. Those meetings will progress, but other things that can be safely put on hold are being put on hold. The San Carlos Farmers Market has been canceled. In terms of sort of inside city operations, we're trying to protect our employees so that they can continue to serve their function of protecting the public. We've closed the City Hall gym. We have limited access to conference rooms and asked that conference-type meetings take place in a virtual setting between employees, so that we can limit interaction and potential threat if we do have an exposure within City Hall, that we don't quickly spread it to the entire staff. We're not a big city. We have limited resources, and we want to make sure that we're protecting those resources so that they can be out in the field serving the public and helping in this public health emergency. In-person meetings are being limited to 3 individuals. Other than the Emergency Operations Center. The City Hall lunchroom is open for food preparation only, and no gatherings or shared meals are allowed in the room at this point. And we're encouraging the 6-foot distance from other individuals, as has been recommended by the county health official. Some essential and non-essential city services will be postponed or available only through online services. For a full list of these services that are being deemed currently as non-essential, you can visit the city's website beginning tomorrow at www.cityofsancarlos.org/coronavirus. But some of them will include, in terms of available only services, business registration, public works permitting processes. Things that have been postponed will include things like regular park maintenance, apartment inspection programs, those types of services. We are implementing a work from home strategy to reduce the spread of the virus within our own workforce and ensure the continuity of city services by assigning staff to fill vacancies or provide essential services. Some folks who can work remotely will begin working remotely tomorrow. Others will work remotely maybe a few days a week and switch off with other folks who will go home and work from home for a few days a week while they come back into the office to help with our essential services that we're providing and also help in supporting our emergency operation response efforts. In terms of public information for our own community, we've set up a hotline, which is 650-802-4347. It's open 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. That focus is really on our own community impacts and the services and programs and facilities within San Carlos that are going to be impacted by this. We will continue to update our website with all the current information, not only about our own services, but the information that we're receiving from the county, the state, and the federal government related to the broader response, be it the Fairfield Inn or just the issue in general as the public health emergency continues to unfold. And again, our website is www.cityofsanccarlos.org/coronavirus. We encourage folks in the community who are looking for information more specific to the disease and the spread and some larger issues to continue to access that information through the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's website, which is www.cdc.gov. San Mateo County has set up a call center for non-medical questions related to the coronavirus. That operation is being staffed 24/7, and you can access it by dialing 211. 211. Hotel operations and media inquiries from the press who are looking for information related to the Fairfield Inn should not direct those inquiries to staff here at City Hall. We are not working on that particular issue. Those inquiries should go to media@caloes.ca.gov or 916-800-3943. So that concludes my update from the council. We have 3 more additional speakers that are going to provide you with updates, and then we'd be happy to answer questions before we hear public comment. And the first up will be Mindy Hill, the wellness coordinator from the San Carlos School District.
Hello, thank you. So I'm speaking on behalf of the San Carlos School District tonight. Our priority is the safety of our students, staff, families, and community. We will make decisions with the guidance and input of the county health officer and our board of trustees. Currently, no public school districts in San Mateo County are closed. However, school superintendents in the county had a very serious discussion of the topic yesterday afternoon, and we're continuing to consult with county health and assess the situation. It is likely that all San Carlos School District schools will transition to a distance learning model beginning Monday, March 16th, and all school facilities, including fields, will be closed to the public. We need extra support from the Sheriff's Department to patrol our campuses because staff on site will be limited to fulfilling essential tasks. We recommend that all families prepare provisional plans for childcare. Before and after school childcare providers will close if the school district goes to the distance learning model. In preparation for distance learning, families received a survey today which will be utilized to analyze access to digital resources. Our teachers, counselors, and administrators are developing distance learning plans and materials as we speak. Our facilities staff has modified their work processes to prioritize cleaning and disinfection, and they're also working to recruit extra weekend staff at this time. You may always check our website, scsd.org, for FAQs, and we want to thank you all and the entire San Carlos community for your continued support and understanding with this continuously evolving situation. We do feel confident in your leadership, and we appreciate that if any needs do arise, other than those additional patrols, we'll be able to reach out to you to discuss them.
Thank you, Mindy. I think next we're going to hear from Eric Lamoureux.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I wish it was certainly under different circumstances, but I appreciate you welcoming us here and giving us the opportunity to answer any questions that you may have. My name is Eric Lamoureux. I'm the Assistant Director of Disaster Response Operations for Cal OES. And as was indicated in a press conference that was hosted here yesterday, we are in a significant emergency situation that requires a collaborative effort across all of California. Cal OES's role in any emergency is to wrap around the communities affected, and unfortunately right now we have a number of communities and a number of California residents that are impacted by this emergency. As we've been seeing with the Grand Princess cruise ship, we have on that ship almost 80% of the passengers were California residents, and over 100 of those were San Mateo County residents. And unfortunately, with the way the virus works, those individuals need a level of quarantine. Dr. Red can speak more to that after me. And we have sites set up in partnership with the federal government at Travis Air Force Base and at Miramar Air Force Base in San Diego. But those sites will only allow individuals that are currently negative or that have tested negative for coronavirus to stay there. And as individuals become positive, oftentimes those individuals are positive, but they have no symptoms. But unfortunately, they can't stay at that military base in either Travis or Miramar. And so we're having to look at establishing alternate care sites like we're establishing here in the city of San Carlos. And I would imagine as the weeks and months go on, we are going to see more of these sites having to be put into service at different parts of the state. So we very much appreciate the partnership here with the city of San Carlos. As was mentioned, we came to you and informed you what we intended to do. And that is never the position that we want to put local governments in, but unfortunately, because of the very dynamic and fast-moving nature of this scenario, specifically with the Grand Princess, but also globally with the emergency that we're dealing with, it was a circumstance that we had to deal with. As was noted, we had a very willing partner in the property owner, but this location also, when you look at the back end, as these individuals are coming out of quarantine, it provides logistically a very convenient way in which for them, especially those folks that have to fly out of the area, the proximity to San Francisco International Airport is a tremendous benefit for the individuals as well. We certainly all need, all of us as Californians need to come together to support those that are impacted by this virus. And certainly the example that's been shown by the city of San Carlos and the county of San Mateo has been tremendous. And I certainly hope, as we are actively looking at several other communities with hotels that we may end up securing to set up similar options, I sincerely hope that they look at San Mateo County and the city of San Carlos as a model of partnering with us. This site, as was noted before, and Dr. Red can speak to in greater detail, is going to be for those individuals that have tested positive or have symptoms that won't allow them to stay at the military base. And so, although it's a 120-room hotel, we don't necessarily believe that we're going to fill the hotel, but it is certainly possible that we may. As was noted, there's about 7 individuals in the hotel currently, and there is a flow of additional individuals that may be arriving tonight. And we have set up systems to ensure that both the city and the county are kept abreast of that as those individuals arrive. As I've noted before, security, safety of the passengers that are in the hotel, the workers that are supporting those individuals, and your community is paramount. And Dr. Redd can speak more to the personal protective equipment that is used to keep the workers safe and the provisions they go through in terms of training and fit testing that equipment, utilization of that equipment to ensure that there's no spread of anything off that site. Security has been a huge priority today. We established last night perimeter fencing around the property. The U.S. Marshals are on site. We have temporarily deployed personnel from the California Highway Patrol to augment the U.S. Marshals Service as they continue to flow in additional officers. And we'll continue to provide any additional bridging support to our federal partners. As you can imagine, across this nation, Dr. Redd and other professionals like him are extremely taxed in the number of operations that they are having to support in communities large and small. And so to the extent we need to step in to support the federal government, this is their mission, this is their responsibility, but we will provide the support to help bridge solutions where it is necessary. And the deployment of the CHP is an example of that. At your request, we've deployed a number of personnel into the city of San Carlos and the county of San Mateo to provide a direct liaison and support. I have 2 emergency services coordinators that are here tonight and are deployed in your city EOC and county EOC. I have a member, assistant chief from our law enforcement branch that is deployed down here. We have an assistant chief from our fire and rescue branch. And then we have a representative from our public information office that's working with your public information office professionals on answering questions from the public and the media. And finally, tonight, Mark Hoover, deputy chief from our law enforcement branch. I've deployed Deputy Chief Hoover here to be our principal senior state official in San Mateo County in the city of San Carlos, so that you have a senior level representative leading our team here on the ground and a go-to for you. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Happy to answer any questions when it's appropriate.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lamoureux. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Redd.
Good evening. I wanted to introduce myself first. My name is Dr. John Redd. I'm a captain in the United States Public Health Service, if you couldn't tell. And I've been spending a lot of time in California in the last weeks. I'm an internist and a medical epidemiologist, and I've spent most of my career with the federal government, with Centers for Disease Control and with Health and Human Services. My current job is I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, who's Dr. Robert Kadlik. And so in my role as Chief Medical Officer for ASPR, I've been deployed to several sites in California now, starting in January, in the end of January. So I've been to March Air Reserve Base down in Riverside, to Travis twice now, and to Miramar, and to Japan, and then most recently here to Oakland in the Bay Area to help with the response to the quarantine on the Princess. And it's been a real honor to work with so many different groups in the state of California and overseas with these responses, and we're extremely pleased to give you an update. So I wanted first to review what the numbers are nationally and in California for COVID-19 infection. In the United States, there are, as of now, 1,459 cases. That includes, unfortunately, 39 deaths. The state of California has been particularly affected, with 198 cases and 4 deaths. Of the cases in California, 60 are travel-related, meaning people who acquired the infection elsewhere and then came here. 43 are from close contact, which refers to people who We're in close contact generally with loved ones or household transmission. 44 have been community transmission, meaning where someone has picked it up in the general community, and 27 are still under investigation. And on board the Grand Princess, we've had 21 cases diagnosed so far. I wanted to go through briefly the procedures that we've been using on the ship itself and why it was necessary to have the ship quarantined in Oakland. Quarantine is something, a federal quarantine is quite rare, and you all are probably familiar with local quarantines, which are fairly common, generally things such as tuberculosis. Federal quarantines are much more rare. Most quarantine is actually a local or state or county function. And in this case, though, we've had federal quarantines on large numbers of persons who have been at risk for coming back with COVID-19 and for introducing it. And quarantine in and of itself represents many different conflicts. First of all, as American citizens, we're all, of course, used to freedom of motion and freedom of association and all those rights that we hold dear. Quarantine in and of itself is a fundamental limitation of those rights on a temporary basis in order to protect the community from transmissible conditions. So in general situations like this, including on the Grand Princess, there are some fundamental contradictions. We, of course, want the medical care for the persons on board to be as good as possible, and they need to be maintained safely. But we have a fundamental responsibility to minimize the risk of any transmission to the community, which is why we're doing the quarantine in the first place. So on board the ship, we have gradually been disembarking passengers. And we've done that very carefully. We're in constant contact with the ship's doctor, who helps us establish passengers who are reporting themselves as being ill. And we've got one gangway, you may have probably seen it on television, but we've got one gangway toward the bow of the ship, and that's generally where we bring down people who are reported as having been ill. And then farther toward the stern, we have a gangway for people who are reported as not being ill. As people emerge from the ship, we have a screening process to make sure that people are well. So people who come down from the healthy gangway are rescreened. We take their temperature and we speak to them briefly to make sure that they're well. And then we have a medical tent on the pier at the other end of the ship for people who are being reported as sick. So I give you those procedures because it leads into why we have a necessity for facilities such as has been established here. And I really want to say that you all are well ahead of things. I want to congratulate you on both your efforts that we've discussed tonight, and I think you're way out ahead of this, and I congratulate you for it. But the issues that come up during an event such as this are twofold, and this refers to the two types of people whom we wish to house at this facility. The first are people who are minimally symptomatic, but who are positive, as Eric mentioned, who are positive for the COVID-19 test. Those people, many of whom I've literally seen, can be very, very minimally affected. Some fortunate people, it's very much like a sort of a deep chest common cold. However, they're positive, and people in the case of this federal quarantine are maintained on military bases, on which, as Eric mentioned, we can't maintain people who are positive because of DOD policies on force protection. So one group of people are those who are minimally affected but positive. Then the other group of people, and those folks get well, and that there are people there now who, if you were just to see them, look perfectly fine, but they've had a positive test. They need to stay there. The second group of people, besides those who are either minimally or unaffected but positive, are people who go there and are minimally affected and need a test, and we're going to have provision of being able to do swab tests there. And the key feature in both of those are that both of those categories of people are people whom we would not like to have in local hospitals. That's really the key function. And but on the other hand, people in this federal quarantine, in effect, have no home to go to. So it's a complicated issue, but this seems to be the best way to keep people safe, make sure that they do well and recover from their illness while maintaining that the community doesn't get affected. So I did want to talk about some of the precautions that we use on the facility. So it's designed to house people from the Grand Princess who don't need hospitalization, but who cannot be maintained in quarantine. So those are the two categories of people I've just mentioned. We have taken great caution to maintain the safety of both the guests there and for staff, all of whom are federal. The entire facility is maintained with CDC standard precautions for infection control, including personal protective equipment, which would be familiar actually to any clinicians in the room. The usual, if you're seeing a patient, the usual, which means close and doing any close procedures, it's gown, face shield, mask, and gloves. And we've got lots of PPE. They got a very large shipment there today, so the facility is well prepared to take people. And the guests there, though, are under federal quarantine orders, and they need to be maintained there for 14 days. We have booked it for a longer time in case that's necessary, but on an individual basis, people who have been evacuated from the ship need to be in a total time of quarantine of 14 days. And Eric, was there anything else that I should mention at the moment? Okay, so thank you very much. I'd be very, very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Redd. We do have a couple of council members that have some questions. I'm not sure which ones they have questions for, but we'll start with Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I cleverly did not think to note down the name of the person who is speaking when I wrote my question down that I want to ask. So is it okay if I just pose the question and whoever feels that they can answer it moves? Okay, that's fine. First off, I want to thank all of the officials who have been involved with this for doing a great job under very trying circumstances. And Dr. Redd, I really appreciate you taking time out of your very, very busy day to come over here and talk to us. It's very much appreciated, and I only hope we're not making you stay up too late with all your duties that you have over there that are pretty serious. So thank you. One of the questions that I have been getting from constituents that I don't actually have an answer for other than some speculation is why a hotel in basically a city as opposed to, I guess, a hotel in a somewhat more remote area, like if there was one in the middle of the peninsula. So I'd be interested just if there's information I can hand on to my constituents about what the thinking process was.
Absolutely. So as I said earlier, we're looking at a number of communities. So we will be setting up additional sites in other parts of the state. Some of those may be more remote. From a sort of logistics and transport standpoint, we want to be remote, but we also don't want to put folks in a situation where they've already been on the cruise ship and now we're going to put them in a transport for 5 hours to get to a remote location. So it's a balance, trying to find the right locations that are the least impactful. And when we did look at, and we did look at a number of properties in San Mateo County, this was the one that we felt was the one that would be the least impactful to surrounding businesses, to residents, but would allow us to be able to operationally meet our requirements. And as I said, we believe that this also provides a tremendous benefit on the back end, especially for individuals that have to fly out of the San Francisco Bay Area region to get back home. Proximity to the airport is useful. But as this event continues to grow and evolve, I believe, unfortunately, that there's going to be many communities, remote and more urbanized, that are going to have facilities like this to help us best care for Californians that are impacted.
Okay, thank you. One subject which has also come up that, again, I don't think anybody tonight mentioned it except in passing. There's obviously been a lot of concern publicly about the availability of test kits and the pace of testing and whatnot. For what it's worth, and this is, from a reasonably good source, but I haven't been able to confirm it myself, I learned today that supposedly in Menlo Park, Facebook has managed to get some kind of an arrangement with the University of San Francisco, UCSF, to produce test kits on some significant scale. And so my question is, are there those kind of alternative sources of supply that are available as a community? Should we be thinking about trying to access those, or what's sort of the professional advice about that?
The ability to test for the coronavirus RNA, which is that's what the test is. It's a polymerase chain reaction test for RNA, has now broadened tremendously. So it's now it's become commercially available. Initially, testing was available primarily through CDC, and then it's been, shouldn't say primarily, solely through CDC at first, and now has been pushed out to state departments of health and here in California to counties, but now has become more broadly clinically available commercially. I don't know about the provision of testing at Facebook in Menlo Park.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate the information because I was not aware of that. Mr. Mayor, I actually have a number of questions, so I'm just wondering, should we maybe do round robin where I ask one more and then pass the baton? Sure. Okay, thank you. This is in part a question, and it's in part perhaps since you all have access to levels of government that I don't have immediate access to, that I wanted to pass along something, which again has been, I only learned about from communications and interactions with some of my constituents. Apparently, in the city of Costa Mesa in Southern California, there was a similar effort in the not too distant past to set up a similar facility, which the city of Costa Mesa actually brought suit against, I guess, the federal and state governments to block. They were joined in that, I guess, by the Orange County Board of Supervisors. I've been told indirectly that the federal judge who granted the initial injunction on occupying and using the facility apparently said something like, I don't see how the plaintiffs are going to prevail, but I don't really have a reason for not granting the injunction. This concerns me only in the sense of, I want to be really clear, I do not feel like San Carlos should have done that. I have responded to all those people who wrote to me saying that we should have done something like that had it come before me, I would not have supported it. For the simple reason that I think, as the mayor said earlier, if it were my family on that boat and it was some other community, I'd take pretty dim view of a community that reacted like that. My feedback or question, if you will, is given that more and more of these facilities are going to need to be opened up, I really think it behooves the appropriate level of government to figure out some way to make sure that those kind of things don't happen or that they get shut down, because otherwise what happens is everybody who is cooperating is going to be under attack for cooperating. And I don't want to divert effort to sort of for ameliorating a dangerous situation to solve a legal problem, but it is a fairly serious problem that could turn into a more serious one for trying to open up stuff. So I want to bring it to people's attention. And I see that Mr. Rubens wants to chime in. So.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Councilmember Olbert. I did look into the Costa Mesa litigation. Yeah, there was a closed developmentally disabled facility in the city of Costa Mesa that the state at one point and the federal government at one point were looking into to see if they could open as a similar facility to the hotel. And they were sued by the city of Costa Mesa, and it's Orange County, I think, did join in it. I looked at some of the pleadings. It's a pretty voluminous docket, so I just looked at a few of them. They went in on an ex parte basis, which is more like an emergency basis without a notice or a formal hearing to get a restraining order, and the federal judge did grant it to maintain the status quo in that instance. the case was dismissed because the site was determined, my understanding, the site was determined not to be suitable for their use. And I suppose the state officials or the federal officials could talk about that if they know. But that case was dismissed as being moot because the site was abandoned. I think there's a couple of distinguishing facts between that situation and now. That lawsuit was brought in February, and it was before the governor's declaration of emergency. I think that might have impacted the analysis of the case if there was actually a state of emergency in effect. And then coincidentally, today's order from March 12th, the governor's order arising out of his declaration of emergency specifically says that the California Health and Human Services Agency and the Office of Emergency Services shall identify and shall otherwise be prepared to make available, including through execution of any necessary contracts or other agreements, and, if necessary, through the exercise of the state's power to commandeer property, hotels, and other places of temporary residence, medical facilities, etc. Essentially, the governor has said that's not going to happen again, I think, when I read that order. So I think that answers primarily the question that Councilmember Obert, you have, that I think in the face of an order under a declaration of emergency, I think the result probably would have been different.
Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate you taking us through that. And I'm glad to see that the governor wised up and did that. That really, that makes the job of all the folks out here who are just trying to get people better a lot easier. So, but I did want to bring it up because it is a topic that's circulating in the community, and it's good to have the clarification so people understand that it was, in my opinion, I guess the way you're describing it, sort of viewed as being a mistake that's not going to be allowed to happen again. So, thank you. Mr. Mayor, as I said, I have a few more questions, but I want to pass the baton.
Laura?
Thank you, Mayor Collins. I have a number of questions also, but I'm going to focus primarily on the folks who are joining us who are out in the field so that they can get back to their operations quickly or get rest as need be. So I have three questions. One is trying to assure the community around when these patients are released and deemed restored to full health. Can you provide some assurances in terms of how that's done and what confidence you have if you were to release somebody from this facility? And hopefully we want them released soon. But if you could talk a little bit about what those procedures are and the degree of certainty that you have with that, that would be helpful.
Well, there are two ways that people could be released. The number one is someone who's in quarantine, and this does not pertain specifically to the people at the facility here, but people who complete their quarantine time, which is 14 days, that represents the maximum incubation period that we've seen with this illness. So if someone has not been ill in 14 days, they've completed their quarantine and they can go on with their lives. In the case of people who test positive, even people who are no longer symptomatic, they can complete their time, and but there are also CDC standards for repeat testing, nasal swab testing, so negative swabs. So we have established standards with CDC for release from this type of setting.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like it's a time span as well as clinical evidence that demonstrates that. Okay, thank you. So the other question I have is there seems to be, unfortunately now, some misinformation that are spread out into the community. And people are also doubting the seriousness of this. I've received some emails asking us to not take certain measures. And it would be helpful to understand, for example, the why behind the need for social distancing. So could you talk a little bit about this condition and why is it that it's recommended that we wash our hands frequently, that we not touch our face with unwashed hands, that we stop shaking hands, why 6 feet, why no longer large gatherings, that type of thing. If you could talk a little bit about how this disease is spread, that would be very helpful.
Certainly. So COVID-19 is spread in the manner that many of us are familiar with influenza. So it's spread generally by what we call droplet spread, which means someone coughs, And when we cough, all of you produce small bits of moisture, and the virus can piggyback on those. And what we found is that the distance over which that can travel when you cough is about 6 feet. So that's the reason for that distance. And that's the origin of the term social distancing, literally. But as far as general hygiene goes, see, I'm just adjusting my glasses here, right? I've probably touched near my face, many times when speaking to you. And the importance of that is why we do hand washing. So the virus is very sensitive to normal hand washing, which is with soap and water, or soapless things like Purell or other sanitizers for 20 seconds. That's the standard amount of time that we recommend. And the reason for that is that the problem is, let's say that I have the condition at hand. I might cough like this, then it's on my hand. I shake your hand, and then shortly thereafter, you touch your nose or your mouth, and that's how these things are spread. And so we found with influenza that recommendations such as social distancing, as we've heard discussed tonight, closures are very unfortunate, but they're effective. And those are extraordinary measures for any of our communities, but this is an extraordinary situation. So, and I was gratified to hear about the plans for telework, because another very important feature is for people to not come to work when they're sick, or not come to school either. That's very, very important, which is difficult for many people, of course, especially with children, but it's crucial. So it's social distancing, hand washing and hygiene, and avoidance of communal places, and don't come to work or school when you're sick. Is that sufficient?
Okay, Adam.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. I just have two quick questions, and one, just want to thank everyone for all the work that's been going on to make this operation smooth, and thank you for your service for this. First question, I mean, I'm assuming based on kind of what we're hearing that things are going to get worse before they get better, and we've got to sort of take the steps that we need to try to either contain or slow the spread of what's happening here. So I have two sort of related questions. One, given the operation at the Fairfield Inn, do you anticipate at some point that you are going to need local resources to do things, that something could happen, whether it's police, fire, others that we should be thinking about moving forward? I guess that's for Assistant Director Lemereux.
So to the current operation at the Fairfield Inn, it's specifically focused on the passengers coming off the Grand Princess. And we do not, outside of what we've talked about already, which would be potentially a transport of someone from the Fairfield Inn because they have some other medical condition. That's the only scenario right now where we would envision potentially needing local support. That's more in the context of local hospitals. And our State Department of Public Health has been actively, daily works with the hospital system here in the greater Bay Area region, so that we are aware of where capacity is, so that if somebody has to be moved out of the Fairfield Inn, we can do that in a smart, strategic fashion with the hospital community. I can't speak to where we're going to be weeks from now and what resources we may need. We are doing extensive contingency planning at the State Operations Center with Cal OES and the Department of Public Health, looking at modeling of what this looks like in the days and weeks to come. So I don't want to suggest that once this operation is over that there won't be another need. But as I said, we are looking across the state for available resources and doing the planning to deal with what's in front of us today and what we may be dealing with in the time ahead, so that we can be as far ahead of what the requirements are. So a long answer to essentially say we don't know where we're going to be with this. We've got the operation, we've got the facility to support this need. To the point that was made earlier, we would like to be in other locations that are a bit more remote, but it's all going to be based upon what the circumstances of the emergency present to us.
Thank you. And then just as a follow-up, I think maybe for either, maybe both of you. I know, Dr. Red, you sort of said we were sort of ahead of the game so far in some of the procedures and actions we were taking. I guess anticipating that this is a dynamic and quickly changing situation, are there things you would recommend that we start thinking about or considering in the days and weeks ahead?
Well, I have a couple of things to say about that. First, for people to know, and this is partially in reference to your first question, there in an outbreak response such as this one, there are two phases. Generally, the first phase is containment, and that's things such as quarantine. And the second phase is mitigation, meaning that we found that it's out in the community, and we have to reduce the effect on all of us. And the principles of mitigation are certainly familiar to anyone who works in the healthcare industry. So if you take a hospital, for example, they might be able to take one ICU patient per day over the course of a month, but they would be unable to accept 30 of them in one day. So just the fact of putting off the peak of a curve such as this one, or minimizing the numbers, spreading it out over time, delaying, all of those things are fundamentally worthwhile. And those are the foundational principles of the types of actions that you've been speaking. So you are way out ahead. And I did want to say one thing about public health, that what we're doing here, and this will affect the entire country. I mean, I think you are correct that this is going to get worse before it gets better. And this will affect everywhere. I think California, by virtue of geography, is in the vanguard, but it will affect every place. And public health is a team sport. As we've seen in this response, it affects everyone. It's clinical care. It's people who work in public health, epidemiology. We've worked with State Department. Our relationships with the state of California are superb. And we really salute the Office of Emergency Services, the governor, the governor's office. And it's a genuine team sport, and this is going to affect everyone. So it's been gratifying to see the responses that you're having.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure who to direct this question to. I'm going to relay some constituent concerns, as my colleague Mark Olbert did. So my first question is, will personnel delivering food and linens and other supplies, or picking up those items, or those interacting with people in the hotel, will they be wearing personal protective gear? Will there be a sanitary cordon? How are safety protocols handled and communicated to the public?
People who deliver food at the hotel or distribute food within it do use PPE, and that's a standard we've established at the other sites that we've maintained. So I can't answer that employees will all be within, who are in the hotel will have PPE. And those standards are well established now, and they're maintained by CDC, and they will maintain an inspection protocol on the facility. So we'll get their consultation. Secondly, regarding a cordon sanitaire, there is a perimeter maintained at the hotel, and that actually is a legal requirement of the federal quarantine, and it's enforced by the U.S. Marshal Service, so with whom we've been working now for many weeks, and the state of California has been working with for weeks, and we were grateful for the dispatching of the Highway Patrol to assist. To start this up. So there is a cordon sanitaire, and that's a requirement. And generally, I mean, I've now been dealing with thousands of people in these quarantine settings, and parenthetically, I say I've been under quarantine many times myself. I deployed many times to West Africa during Ebola times 5 years ago, 2014, 2015. And so I've been subject to quarantine. I was living in New Mexico for many weeks of my life after deployments. So I'm actually familiar with what it's like. It's a legal requirement, and I viewed it as my duty. And I've found the attitude of the people with whom I've been interacting in these sites actually very much the same. So people generally understand.
Thank you, and I want to thank you for your service, all of you. I also wanted to just direct a comment to Mindy Hill with the school district. I know that your decisions are not taken lightly, and I know that it's a very difficult call to make, but I do want to reiterate that we're happy to support the school district in whatever way possible. I know that you're looking at technology for the kids, and if there's a way that the city can lend a hand, please do let us know.
All right. Mark, you had a couple more questions?
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Just two. And I want to sort of turn my attention sort of going forward, because after we let you guys get back to work, the next thing that we're going to be talking about is what future action should we take. So we've certainly received a lot of guidance from many agencies, which I very much appreciate, about how we ought to establish rules of interaction in San Carlos for the community. But let me ask you to, if you had a blank slate and you were sitting here and you were like, what should San Carlos do? Which might range from anything like, I'm being hopefully a little extreme here, ban all public assemblies, assuming we have the right to do that, which Greg will let me know. But that's what I'm kind of thinking about. In other words, what things have we not been asked to do that you, based on the front lines of what's going on, say, you know what, it wouldn't be bad if you did these other things. So I'd be interested in hearing that.
So the question really is what further actions to consider, right? Yes. Well, you can see from other communities that have dealt with this that the range of potential responses is extremely wide. And it is fundamentally a local, county, or state decision. Despite the federal presence in this event, most public health is local, actually, and the decisions are made at bodies such as yours. And for places like Seattle in Washington, that's having a real difficulty, they went beyond. So I'm going to say that you're going to have to remain flexible, and hopefully we can help this go as well as possible. But the range is very broad, as you've seen around the world. And I will say in California, the responses have been local. So there are parts of the state in which there's been community transmission, and those parts of the state are taking more aggressive measures. So I'm not going to pretend to take the role of the council in deciding things for the future. But I would say keep an open mind and stay tuned to results and what the clinical situation is locally, and respond locally.
I appreciate your candor. In the interest of time, I won't do the obvious thing I was thinking of doing, which is to say, well, pretend you lived here. But because that, well, we'd love to have you live here. Last question. My sense is, particularly when I look at some of the actions that have been taken by other communities and kind of how the trajectory of this thing is playing out, particularly as we start sort of sending people or telling people, don't go to work, don't go to school. So we're basically putting people back on their own very local resources within their own household, within their own community. That's a different kind of world than we have right now. And are there lessons or protocols that you folks are aware of or could direct us to basically help educate neighbors? Like, if neighbors want to help neighbors, what should they do? I mean, for example, I have a couple of neighbors live next door to me who are in their 80s. I think they're in reasonably good health for people who are in their 80s. But are there things that I should be doing other than what I am doing, which is knocking on the door occasionally and saying, hey, is everybody still okay? So I'd appreciate whatever advice you'd care, or even if it's just go talk to this person or go look at this website or whatever.
I think it's exactly what you said. It's checking on your neighbors, but understanding the environment we're in. The neighbor may not want to answer the door and talk to you. Right. So I think leaving a note for them, letting them know if you've never met them, who you are, what your phone number is. If you ever need something, give me a call, and make sure to try to help you. So, you know, we always, in emergency preparedness, that's one of the key principles of emergency preparedness, and a whole community approach to disaster preparedness is taking care of one another and looking out for our neighbor. Even if they've been our neighbor for 25 years on the other side of the fence and we've never really engaged with them, engage with them at least so that you establish that that connection and they know how to get a hold of you. So I think what you're talking about is continuing. Although there will be a level of isolation and there's social distancing, we still have to look out for one another. So figuring out that way to literally get a message to your neighbors so they know who you are, how to get a hold of you. Because there is going to be a need as individuals isolate to be able to support one another, especially those that are most elderly in our communities. And not just those that are most elderly, but we always want to remember the community that in emergency preparedness we refer to as the access and functional needs community. Folks that are not only elderly, but disabled or have other injuries or disabilities, and ensuring that we wrap around them and are prepared to help them to the extent we can.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and definitely will keep that advice in mind. I will just mention in passing, as you were talking, you reminded me of something. My family lived through the Northridge earthquake back in 1991. We were about 4 miles away from the epicenter, which I would not recommend you do. It was really interesting. We had lived in the neighborhood for about a year, but we all actually got to know each other far better as a result of that earthquake and going around and clearing broken glass from people's doorways and stuff, and it led to some great block parties afterwards. So there is a positive side to it too. Thank you.
Sarah, you had one more question?
I do. It'll be quick. I wanted to note that Jeff had mentioned this earlier, that we have so many people writing into us wanting to help those who are here in the hotel. And anything from, can the school children make cards? Can we provide cards or books or games or things to pass the time? I know that we can't know them individually, but is there anything that our community can do to support them while they pass their 2 weeks here in San Carlos?
And we certainly love that when the community wants to come together anytime there's an emergency. We certainly want to be cautious of the materials that may get collected during any emergency. That generosity sometimes becomes an added burden for the emergency responders to manage. There had been a conversation last night before our press conference that I think is something that is potentially exciting, and that is looking at how we can use the technology that obviously folks are going to be relying on in their rooms for the community to send virtual messages to those individuals. So that we don't have to deal with cards showing up to the hotel or games. Certainly if there is a need, we, the federal and state family, are going to be addressing those needs. So I don't envision a situation where we're going to need food or additional, if the residents need, the residents in the hotel need additional games, we're going to do that. We've got another facility that we're currently utilizing in a more remote location in Monterey County. And unfortunately, those individuals are in rooms that don't even have a landline phone. So we are getting iPads to them. We set up Wi-Fi to support them. And so we're prepared to give them the comfort features that they need to be comfortable during their quarantine period. But I really like the idea, and it was somebody here in the room, I don't recall who, that made the recommendation. I think it's a great idea of figuring out a way to send virtual messages to these folks. So that's, I think, something that would be worth considering.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, as you can see, we have a rather inquisitive group of council members, so I had a list of questions. They've all been answered. I only had one. Today was a really interesting day. I guess it just comes with the job when you're mayors that I notice a lot of emails to me personally rather than everybody else included. So I got phone calls, several from people in Redwood Shores, particularly concerned. I guess they had not been in the information loop. But a couple comments people made to me were, well, what if the people in the hotel want to jump the fences and get out? I said, I highly doubt that they'll be doing that, but maybe, I don't know, Dr. Redd or Eric, if you could maybe enlighten us on why that may not happen.
Well, that's a two-part answer. So as I've said, my experience with the people who've been maintaining the settings has actually been very positive, and we've had very, very few instances of that. But the fact is that should someone try to elope, as we say, they cannot be allowed to under federal law. And The marshals are the lovely people. I've met many of them, but they take their responsibility very seriously. So the fact is that people are under federal quarantine, that they will not be allowed to leave.
Okay, thank you. We do have a couple people that wanted to speak. The first is Dominic Chirichillo. Did I get that right, Dominic? Yes, you did. I never use your last name. It's always just Dominic.
That's fine, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing us to speak. On behalf of Domenico Winery, I just want to commend and let you guys know this was quite a great event for me to learn all the things that are happening here, and that you guys took such a great proactive approach. It's comforting to know that the federal government is here. The state and local government is doing everything they can to contain this virus. And I just want to reassure you, as a business owner in the community that does large events, that we are also taking precautions and doing everything we possibly can to have our facility in top-notch shape, sanitized. Our employees are all been briefed. We have meetings about it. So we're very proactive, and we're appreciative that the fact that the event business can continue, and we will be very conscious and do everything we possibly can to keep everybody safe. So thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Next is Chris Garrett.
Thanks for all you guys, everything you're doing. We really appreciate it. I would definitely look to you guys for recommendations for our business. As you know, we host a lot of big events in our facility. Currently, most have been canceled. We also open to the public every Friday, typically anywhere from 50 to 1,000 people, depending. Under the current condition, I anticipate a lot less. But whatever you do decide in limiting gatherings based on state mandate, federal, or your own, please make it fair and equal to all businesses in the county. We all operate under the same license types. We all have the same type of business privileges. But please make it unilateral and not call out one individual business or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I don't have any other speaker cards. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak or address us tonight? Okay. Thank you. I just want to say in closing before we move on that I don't think I've ever lived through any period of my life with an experience like this. There are some wonderful things coming out of our community that I very much appreciate. Also some disturbing things. I hope people remember that we are all part of the human race, and that we're not infallible. We are always trying to do the best. I don't think I've met anybody that isn't trying to do the best. We're all trying to survive. And so what I'm hoping that people will do is when they encounter somebody who thinks that, well, they shouldn't be here, let's send them somewhere else. Let's send them to Tracy. Let's send them to Bishop or something like that. That, you know, you understand where they're coming from, but also try to explain to them that we are all part of the family of man, and that everyone deserves compassion, particularly those people who would rather probably be anywhere else than that hotel right now. They were on, I don't know how long they were on the ship, but they were on it for quite a while, and to have such a sour end to what was supposed to be a happy experience in their life, it's got to be greatly distressing to them. So, Laura, you had another comment?
I just have a procedural question.
Yes, go ahead.
With respect to some of the comments made by the public, I'm just wondering, we don't have an agenda and reflection setting item on the agenda tonight, so I'm just wondering what the thoughts are about any kind of follow-up activities that we might want to pursue if...
Yeah, I think as we've, when ideas or thoughts come up during agenda items like this, what you are allowed to determine through your policies whether or not you want to agendize something for a future meeting without any substantive discussion of that item. Just identifying the issue and then deciding whether you want to move forward with it at a future meeting.
Well, so I was inspired by Mindy Hill's comments with respect to additional patrols for the schools if they're to shut down. So I'd like that to be considered for future discussion. I don't know if any other council members would be open to that.
Yes.
Through the chair, I am certainly open to that, but I'm wondering if, Greg, if we're allowed to, I think the chief is still here. I saw him a minute ago. He's outside.
He's in and out, but we have already spoken with that, and I've given direction for any such patrols to be carried out. So
I was going to ask you.
But if the council would like to discuss it further, we'd be happy to agendize it.
If that's in motion and within your purview, Jeff, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, well, we are going to move back to item 4B, which is a discussion and action of preventative measures to mitigate the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic affecting San Carlos, and including limiting the size of group gathering and those measures issued by the city manager. But before we launch into that, I just want to thank Dr. Redd and Mindy Hill and Eric Lamoureux once more for coming tonight. I know all of you had to travel a long way, and I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, so we are very grateful for your time spending with us tonight.
Thank you both.
Okay, so Jeff, a little bit of guidance here on how we approach this this discussion. Is this sort of a period of time where we are going to be asking you questions or throwing out ideas, or how does that work?
Well, let me just give you a little bit of background here, and this item I think we will handle in a flexible way, as you're kind of keying on there, Mr. Mayor. When we put this agenda together, and obviously we're moving very quickly, and this is a very dynamic situation, we knew from the council that you wanted to be able to have a full range of options to consider. You wanted to know what you could do to help protect your community and businesses and folks in town. And one thing that we saw some other communities doing was limiting the allowed size of community gatherings. This may, up to you in terms of your judgment, have become a moot point today. We were just notified recently that the San Mateo County health officials put an order in place which covers all of San Mateo County, so including our jurisdiction, limiting those gatherings to 250 people per event and venue, with the caveat too that that's also subject to the health officials' judgment in terms of the size of the venue. So it's a really small venue, 250 people may not cut it in the health officials' mind, but 250 is the number. That seems to mirror what we're seeing in a number of other communities in the Bay Area and counties that have taken this action. So that's the latest and greatest, but it is within your purview to raise that number up. Well, maybe not actually. You can't raise the number up because of what the health officials done, but you could lower it even further within your jurisdiction, subject again to your judgment and direction here tonight. We're happy to help you in terms of any discussion or questions you might have.
Jeff, just a clarification. What was, if there was a previous number to the 250, what was it? Or is this a new?
There wasn't, no, okay. No. So I do know a couple of agencies had 1,000 and then have since lowered it to 250. Some are still operating under 1,000. Some of those jurisdictions are jurisdictions that have venues that operate like large sporting events, that kind of thing, where they have tens of thousands of people in gatherings. But 250 now seems to be the most common number that we're seeing.
I'm sure that my colleagues all have items that they'd like to talk about. I just have one quick question. Is what I'm looking at the seating arrangement of the immediate future until further notice?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. All right. Laura.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a quick question on the 250 persons. Do you happen to know what the factors were that drove that particular number?
I don't. That's just a very recent development. I'd be happy to pass that on to the county and ask for a response that we can get for you, Council Member.
Council Member Farmer Lohan, there was a guidance issued by the California Department of Public Health that also references the 250 that was issued just recently. I don't know if it formed part of what the county decided to do. And the governor made those requirements in his order of today, essentially mandatory requirements. So the governor has an order that says 250 max, and then with a guidance that smaller venues might require a smaller number.
And then a follow-up question pursuant to members of the public, Dominic Cicciarello and Mr. Garrett remarked about the impact to their business. With the state of emergency that's been issued by the governor, will these small business owners have access to resources to help them, bridge the tide as you were of these difficult times?
We've gotten that question several times today, and we believe that there are some state and federal programs available. We're trying to better understand what the parameters are and how to access that information and do some outreach so that we can get that information here into City Hall and begin to share it with our business community, who we don't want to forget are also a vital part of our town, and we don't want them to be lost in the shuffle either. So we've got staff in our economic development department that have been tasked with pulling those resources together beginning first thing tomorrow morning.
And through the chair, Mr. Mayor, there also in the extension of the emergency that you adopted earlier tonight, we specifically referenced resources from the Small Business Administration because that's part of my understanding, part of the recent federal bill that authorized some Small Business Administration loans for businesses affected by the crisis.
Adam?
Thank you, Mayor Collins. I had just two questions, I guess. One, assuming with the 250 number, I mean, things are obviously been fluid, things are moving pretty quickly. So if we got into a situation, let's say next week, that things have drastically changed in San Carlos, we could have another meeting to make some changes if need be, or if the county makes some changes, we would just could follow those recommendations at this point. Because then if we do, it could be, emergency meeting would be 2-hour notice and a special meeting is 48 hours, or what is that?
24.
24. So if things change dramatically, we could take those steps in a pretty quick fashion.
You're absolutely right. And under the order of the emergency declaration order, I believe that if let's say something happened that was just very dramatic, I would give that order myself and then bring it back to council for ratification, just like the declaration of emergency. We won't let process and procedures stand in the way of protecting the San Carlos community and public. We will do everything we can as staff within the scope of the law and our powers. And at the very moment we think bringing the council together for a meeting will do even just a minor improvement for public health and safety, we will be on the phone with you getting that meeting together. In the spirit of that, also as part of the orders that came out today, Governor Newsom has relaxed Brown Act standards so that you can be in remote locations. If we need to have a meeting 2 hours from now and you're down in the San Jose area, you are going to be able to call in without posting or noticing that type of location. So I think the governor rightly recognized that we need flexibility right now. Public safety is what we're about at this moment in time, and we're going to be in this situation for a while. And part of keeping the public safe is going to be our ability to convene our city leaders when we need you to make those important decisions. So that will be right in the front of our mind as we approach new developments in this emergency.
And just as a follow-up to that, so we can, actually I'll move on to my next question. So so I guess hopefully, and Greg, if this is not germane, let me know, but I'd like to just sort of get a sense of kind of where we are with the library. We've talked about really all the other buildings, a lot of the other things, but that's not listed at all. And so if that's, given that we do have people there, maybe in groups that maybe would hit over capacity?
We have a call with the Director of Library Services tomorrow, and I believe that there'll probably be a lot changing overnight on that subject, as there is with the schools. I think those two things have been pretty linked in a lot of people's minds, but we're looking to get clearer direction. We do have the ability at some point, if we don't agree with the library system, to close the library. The facility is ours, but right now we've let the library JPA kind of be the voice on whether or not that opens or closes at this point in time.
Got it. So if we wanted to step in, we could just close the facility, and the library itself, they couldn't have access, and that would be our way to circumvent that from that end. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mark?
Thank you, Ron. I actually would like to not so much shift things a little bit, but try and engender a little discussion on the dais. In all honesty, I'm finding this a particularly challenging and confusing sort of thing to think through, in part because of something I learned, Ron, from you this afternoon. So would you mind sharing with the rest of the dais what you told me, what you talked about in the conversation you had with Dr. Christy Dean after the press conference last night about the time window that we have here?
Yes, when talking to her after the press conference, Charity Dean is, Dr. Charity Dean is with the State Office of Public Health, I believe, and she spoke last night at the press conference. But her comment to me afterwards was, we have about 2 weeks. This is her opinion, but she's a professional, and I think she's probably watching this more closely than the rest of us. She said this country has about 2 weeks, and she said, and if we don't get our act together nationally, that we risk having something on the scale of what's happening in Italy. And she said their public health system has collapsed there. And that was a very sobering thought. I would hope that we're not anywhere close to that, but that was the comment she made to me.
Thank you. That was what I recalled, but it always pays to check in on something like that. And not at all to either undermine or disagree with what Dr. Dean said. I mean, that is clearly one person's opinion. There's a whole bunch of other people who are weighing in throughout the policymaking apparatus to decide on limits and whatnot. But I have to tell my colleagues that statement really gave me pause. And what it makes me wonder is there is a pattern sometimes to some crises, not necessarily medical ones, where you end up doing what I would refer to as chasing the rabbit. You're always not quite where you need to be. And in hindsight, when the dust settles, you end up looking back going, gee, if I had only known, I would have leaped 3 steps ahead, and then I might have actually been in front of the rabbit. The obvious implication here is, should we, as San Carlos, be more aggressive than the powers above us are suggesting or requiring us to do? That issue is further complicated, let alone the issue of whether we accept or reject the idea of having a 2-week window for the nation to get itself organized. With the very realistic issue of what we do here is only going to affect us locally. I mean, we don't get to set the rules for the state of California or the county of San Mateo or what have you. And personally, even if it turns out in hindsight we all should have been much more aggressive on our rules about the size of assemblies, for example, I don't necessarily want to harm everybody in San Carlos because everybody else isn't following the same rules. And yeah, maybe we ended up being right, but that's so what? We're not going to be able to save the world by what we do here. So I'm really kind of in a quandary, but I am questioning in my own mind whether or not we ought to seriously think about going beyond what, for example, the county of San Mateo has suggested, and maybe more aggressively limiting the size, assuming we have the statutory authority to do that, more aggressively limiting the size and scope of assemblies, and maybe even doing things like closing the library and whatnot. So I'm not convinced one way or another about that, but I would love to have a discussion about it.
Well, Laura's going to talk about it, so she has a thought.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Collins. Mark, in response to your comments, this is how I view this and where I understand we are as a community and as a nation. So we're talking about virus containment as it pertains to the hotel, but the virus is out in the community. So where we are right now, in my opinion, is that we're at minimizing the risk of exposure for each of our own selves. And the guidelines that are put in place, and why I asked Dr. Redd to help us understand the why behind those behavior changes and structural changes that we're making. So for example, the seats being 6 feet apart are all designed to ensure that we don't, if one of us is unwittingly infected, that we don't pass it on to someone else. I've been dealing with this issue at work for several weeks. It's a large-scale global organization. What I'm observing that they're doing is exactly what I'm seeing the very capable team here in San Carlos, as well as the county, as well as the state do, which is to follow a standard protocol around incident and crisis management that is well thought through. And I'm confident that if it gets to the point where we need to enact even stricter measures, that those people who have the expertise and the knowledge and understanding of this disease, and as they learn more, will inform us of that. My personal belief is that self-care and self-hygiene, taking care of oneself, getting enough rest, washing your hands, finding moments of joy, right? Life still needs to be lived. Caring for our families is really, in my opinion, the best thing that we can do. So I'm reticent to try to take it one step further because in my opinion, we would be in uncharted waters, and I think we would be putting staff in a position that is, you know, they're stretched as it is, and I don't want to put more on them. I would rather that we work through the sources of truth and authority like the CDC and the state of California. So that's my position. I feel very confident in the procedures and practices that have been enacted thus far, and I feel comfortable that if we all do our part, we will get through this.
Thank you, Laura. Sarah?
Thank you, Mayor. I hear your concerns, Mark, and it's weighed heavily on me as well. I'd always like to err on the side of caution than not. But my question is for Jeff and our staff here today. I do think that another lever that we can pull in San Carlos, which we're very good at doing, is a massive public information campaign. And I'm wondering if we're preparing a newsletter or a mailing where we can educate the community more, especially our seniors who may not be looking at the website and getting the information on social media. What are we doing to really educate the community about the resources that are available, and plus individual responsibility and the, you know, cautions that we have from the federal government about staying inside? And
so our focus to date this week has really been on electronic information, telephone type information, that sort of thing. But we've already begun a special spotlight issue for the community on this, and we're working with our printers and producers, hoping that we can get a 48 to 72-hour drop to get these things into actually people's mailboxes by Monday or Tuesday of next week, recognizing from our community survey that that is in fact our most powerful means of communication here in San Carlos with our residents, and understanding that not everybody has access and usability of the technology at the same level as everybody else. So that effort has already begun.
thank you.
All right, Adam.
So I just wanted to piggyback on what both Councilmember Olbert said and Vice Mayor Palmer-Lohan. So I guess my question then, I guess, Laura, would be, do you feel the same way about the library as things? Because that to me seems like it's something we have some more control over, and I'm not sure what protocols are in place over there, and that may be something that we want to take action sooner. I guess you're meeting tomorrow, Jeff, you said. So, I mean, maybe after that, if we could, I mean, I'd be comfortable, because that's something you have authority over to do anyway. So you could make that decision and we can do that. Because that to me is the one sort of main public piece that's out there that we haven't dealt with. And so I know, Laura, you spoke a little bit. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I would say, I think that one, I mean, maybe I don't fully appreciate what Mark is suggesting, but again, I think if your perspective on that is that they're currently not adhering.
I don't know.
Right, so maybe the question that we need to do is just better understand that. It's possible that they are, but I mean, it sounds like we're going to know within 8 hours or so.
Yeah, so the programming has stopped, you know, like the event type programming, that sort of thing. I think really what we're talking about here is a very similar situation that the schools are in. It's the definition of closing, right? I don't believe that 24 hours from now the library is going to be operating in a normal way. But that doesn't mean that perhaps they aren't still able to provide some services to the community in a non-traditional way. And we want to understand from library staff what they think those are, like remote learning for the schools, right? There's still education happening. There's still mission focus happening and service being provided to the community, but maybe not in person and walking into the library anymore, I suspect, or in a very limited way in terms of their services. So we simply want to understand what their plan is for the library. But I think I hear the council very loud and clear that, you know, you believe that the facility itself in terms of normal operation needs to change, and I think we agree with that as well. It's just a matter of working with the library to define what that looks like.
I heard you say, Jeff, earlier that it's tied to the school, so just getting back to what you're saying, I think, isn't that part of the delay perhaps, is to make sure that systems and processes are in place that should they close, that the kids who use that service are taken care of?
There's been a lot of coordination and discussion around that issue between the youth centers and the libraries and the school system and the youth sports leagues and all those types of things, recognizing that there's a lot of we're basically dealing with a lot of the same constituency here.
Thank you.
Mark, before I get to you, I just wanted to respond to some of the things I've been hearing. I actually understand and appreciate exactly what you're thinking. And it's, you know, a lot of people are worried based on a lot of things we've heard. But from all the emails that I got today, to me, the sort of the concept or the message that I got loud and clear was that people don't have enough information, and a lot of the fear and concern and anger that I was hearing was all because people don't know what to do and they don't have enough information. And so I like Sarah's idea about, you know, getting a newsletter out. I like the fact that we're working on a special spotlight issue. More communication we can have and more ways that we can have that communication, I think, is probably the most important thing we can do. And keep updating our website, keep sending things out, making sure that that information goes out to people, encouraging them to send that information to their neighbors in other cities. And as a matter of fact, I took our press release today and I sent I emailed a copy to one of our fellow council members in Redwood City and one of our fellow council members in Belmont. So I think the more we can get this information out, the more we can communicate with people exactly what we know, what we don't know, what we can do, what we can't do, what's realistic, what isn't realistic. I think that's probably the most valuable thing that we can do at this time. My other worry is that I think, as Laura said, I don't want to get out ahead of the experts. I think we need to follow the experts' advice. They live and breathe this every single day. So anyway, Mark, you wanted to chime in again?
Yeah. First off, to be clear, I wasn't suggesting any specific thing. I appreciate the discussion that's taken place. A couple of things. One is I actually was hoping that we would spend some time separately talking about communication and outreach, because I agree that I made a note that I'd like to see us be pretty aggressive on that. I really like the spotlight issues. I know we get a lot of traction out of that, but I have to say, in this particular circumstance, I'd say the sooner you get something out, the better. In other words, if it has to be Xeroxed and stuffed in an envelope, do that, okay? No, I'm serious.
You're absolutely right, and that's what we told them. Design is not a factor for this particular one.
And I would rather err on the side of sending out multiple things with typos in them than waiting to have it look really nice. And frankly, because of some of the points that were made in response to my question about how can neighborhoods help themselves. Because basically what we're talking about here, one way or another, is sort of dissolving some of the bonds of larger communities and throwing people back on more local things, and really local, and that's fine, but we need to help people figure out how to do that. So the more communication we can do along that lines, the better. Two other things. One is I would never put myself in the place of overriding, I should say rarely put myself in the place of overriding experts on stuff. On the other hand, and unfortunately she's not here to answer the question, Dr. Dean is an expert also, a very high-level expert. And for her to have made a comment that, the United States was within 2 weeks of turning into Italy if we don't get our act together, as I said, gives me pause. Because presumably she knows all the things that all the other experts have told us. The other thing I would point out to folks is, back of the envelope calculation, there may be a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised about this, nor blame the people for this, there may be a little bit of inconsistency in some of the directives that are coming down from above, because those things are all the result of compromises and thinking about stuff. Consider a room that's 60 feet long by 60 feet wide, so it's 3,600 square feet, which is actually a pretty big room, okay? It's bigger than this room. Roughly speaking, you could fit only 100 people in there and have them 6 feet apart from each other. Now, that's not quite true because of the diagonals. You could squeeze a few more people in. I couldn't work out the math here in my head with that. But round numbers, let's say that's 100 people in 3,600 square feet. That's a pretty dispersed group, okay? That's a pretty dispersed group. And when I start thinking about maybe we should set lower assembly limits, that's exactly the kind of thing I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, in practice, how do people arrange themselves in a room when you have certain size meetings and stuff, and how big are rooms typically. And you look at how we've had things arranged here. To fit 250 people at this kind of grid work, we'd have to take probably almost all of City Hall to do that. And so, it is possible, not being critical, but it is possible that the directives coming down from above are well-intentioned, thought out, and logically inconsistent with themselves, in which case that causes us to have to think a little bit about which ones we follow. So I just, pass that along.
Sarah.
If you don't mind, I have two separate topics that I wanted to bring up, if that's all right. Number one is volunteerism in our community. We're a community of very strong volunteers, and I've received a lot of emails, again, of people asking how they can help. I think that there's an overriding concern about our senior citizens being a vulnerable group, and we've closed our adult community center, which I think was the right thing to do. But how do we reach out to them? I know some communities are giving out boxed lunches once a week or something like that. Are the Friends of the ACC able to step in and help out? Can we activate our CERT teams to go out and check on them? Or I read one article about neighborhoods collecting shopping lists from homebound seniors and then taking, $100 and getting their shopping done for them. So what are we doing as a city to kind of think about that population?
We've heard a number of those things in recent days, and we've asked our Parks and Rec department and some other folks out of our EOC to begin exploring some of those possibilities so that we can, take that energy and positiveness of our community and start channeling it in ways that would really be helpful to their neighbors, and that is definitely a population where it would be helpful now that they're more homebound because of the nature of this particular virus. So we're working on that particular issue. Nakaya Nachman in my office is kind of leading the effort in terms of the welcome wagon and those types of issues. And so I would encourage you to contact those folks and Amy and Nakaya and work with them directly in terms of sharing some of your thoughts and any folks that you've come in contact with that you have contact information on where you know they're ready to roll up their sleeves and do some of that work, because I think this is going to go on for quite a while. And we need to be prepared. Right now, things are really very hectic as we get everything up to speed, but as things start to settle into a pattern, hopefully, because hopefully they're not going to be getting worse after a certain period of time, but we'll be in sort of a maintenance mode, we'll really be able to start focusing on those things. You know, right now, it's only been a couple of days without these services, but by the end of next week, that number is going to start getting to be long for some folks. Just like we're concerned about the folks that are stuck in the hotel, we have to recognize that we have folks that are stuck at home here unexpectedly as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I have one other topic that I'd like to raise. I've noticed that South San Francisco and Menlo Park have recently created rental assistance funds. In Menlo Park, it's administered by Samaritan House to help residents who find themselves out of work or low-wage workers that have their hours cut back. So I'm throwing out this idea, if this is of interest to council, to bring back at some future date.
I'd be interested in that.
I would as well, if we could take a look and see what they've done. Yep.
Okay. Did you have any other? Okay. I know that Laura and Mark wanted to make a couple more comments, but I believe there's a gentleman out in the audience that wanted to make a public comment. Is that true, sir? If you would, please come up, and you got 2 minutes, and when you're done, you can fill out a speaker card and give it to our city clerk. Thank you.
My name is William Clusen. I live in San Carlos. I'm a physician at Stanford. I'd like to talk, first of all, I'd like to clarify that I believe the federal government came up with a policy of 250 people, and I read that somewhere, and it's occurring across the country. I'd like to address concerns about the library because it's been important to me. I'm divorced. I have a child visitation, which always occurs at the library. My daughter is in 7th grade. She's an excellent student. She's getting almost straight A's. I'm an MIT graduate. I help her with her math homework because she's in an accelerated math course. And we always do this at the library. In fact, I spent last 3 hours at the library till it closed at 6 o'clock, and I've been with her at that library since she was a tiny baby at the insistence of the mother. So I know a lot about the library, and I think it would be horrible to close it. I think, they are already canceling a lot of events. They're canceling book sales. It's rare for them to have a big group meeting, although they have some rooms on the 2nd floor where you could have a big group meeting. But in reality, there are never more than about 40 people at that library. So it's way below your 250 limit. And, I'm very worried when I heard, well, we got to get more information. I want to give you the information. The number of, they have staff and people, patrons, and generally the tables for the patrons are separate. And so the patrons are more than 6 feet apart in general. And unless you're specifically working with someone like me, helping my daughter with her homework, we're obviously right next to each other. About half the people go there to use computers now because people use computers more than books. And they have about 25 computers, and the computers are arranged in rows. And when you use a computer, you actually are sitting right next to someone, much closer than you folks are sitting. So if you're going to do anything about the library to make it more compliant, please don't close it, but you might suggest that they move the computer, set up several rooms for the computers. They can use their upstairs rooms, which are almost never used. Put some computers up there and make them space the computers 6 feet apart. But please don't close it. It's very important, particularly for children and parents helping their children with their homework. Thank you.
Thank you. And don't forget to fill out a speaker card. That's in the back table there. Anyone else wishing to speak before we come back to our discussion? Okay, seeing none. Mark, thank you for indulging me.
Indulging you? You're the mayor.
And the speaker.
Oh, I mean, you're welcome. I want to switch gears a little bit and ask a question of staff sparked by something that Sarah said. If, and I'm not saying I'm going to propose this, but if we wanted to, do we have the statutory authority to, as a result of the state of emergency, to, for example, declare we're not processing any more planning submissions because we need to redeploy the planning department staff to work on X, Y, and Z related to the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, you've actually already given the city manager the authority to make such determinations through the declaration of emergency. The question is, does the city manager think, well, this is an issue that I think I better bring to the council just to make sure that the council agrees with my decision? But some decisions he doesn't have time. That's the nature of a declaration of emergency. He might need to respond to something quickly. From a procedural standpoint, that what you just described is definitely within the city manager's authority.
Good, because the thing that occurs to me is that depending upon exactly what it is that we want to do, this is an emergency. There are an awful lot of community outreach things that we're thinking about doing, and I would not necessarily want to see them hamstrung for lack of staff resources. I really like the idea. I think it's very important and appropriate, particularly in San Carlos, to rely on our volunteer community, as we often do, but crises are crises, and maybe, we sprinkle more staff in there as well. So that's something I'd like to sort of come back to and think about.
Yeah, and those discussions have been happening all week at the staff level in terms of how we're trying to classify essential and non-essential services. And we recognize that there's a line in community development and public works in terms of those application processing. We'll be putting out more information about that next week, but there will be some significant changes in those areas in terms of the services that are available to the community and the speed at which things will be processed going forward during this period of time.
Okay, Laura?
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to go back to something, Mark, you said earlier about the application of some of these new rules and expectations and the complexity associated with that. So Dr. Charity Dean informed me of a resource. It's a website that's published by the California Department of Public Health. It's cdph.ca.gov, and they have a COVID update page, and in it includes some guidance documents that cover things from, how do you house clean a house with patients that are COVID-19 positive, things with respect to gathering guidance and a whole array of topics that could be a potential resource. One thing to your point that I think, might be interesting is, for example, the county has set up this 211 line or whatnot, and I'm wondering if that's the place that people can go to try to understand the application of these new. So it's one thing to kind of be told the new rules, right? And I think to your point, Mark, it's how do you actually apply them, right? Like when put it into the real world and assimilating that information and making those behavior changes can be somewhat complex, right, to think through. So is the county the potential resource for us to point people to help them understand how to assimilate all these different new practices that are being asked of them? Do you know, Jeff?
So far, that 211 resource seems to be the catch-all for those types of questions. Everything related to, the virus impact that's not specifically related to you having a medical emergency or feeling like you're sick. So we're trying to better understand it. I know they're still fleshing out that 211 service, but it sounds like it's like a really robust FAQ type issue. And so to the extent that you have those resources, they likely have them too. And as they're working with all the subject matter experts, all those sources are trying to be consolidated and put into that tool as far as we understand it, and we'll keep tracking that and understanding it as it evolves, just like our own FAQ is evolving.
Jeff, were there any final thoughts or messages that staff wanted to convey to us or have us be aware of before we move to adjourn?
Just like to thank the council for all their time and attention on this. You've been great to work with throughout this. We're going to keep you in the loop, and you know, I think for the council, for the community, this is a long way from being over. And, you know, there's going to be twists and turns along the way. I can't tell you what they are, but, you know, we have a fair amount of experience here at City Hall with these kinds of emergencies, and so we know to expect the unexpected. Be kind to each other, be kind to yourselves. I know there's a lot of anxiety and fear in the community. There's a lot of anxiety and fear in City Hall. You know, I think we need to recognize that. There's not a lot we can do about anxiety and fear, right? But there's a lot we can do about how we react to it as a community. So support each other, support your neighbors, support your friends, maybe not so much in person as much as remotely, but we've got all that great technology right in our pocket right now. Reach out to folks that you know are stuck at home or need help or are sick. And if I know anything about this community, I know that that's not likely to be a real challenge for y'all. So if there's anything you're hearing out there in the community, you know, next door, Facebook, that you know seems particularly scary or strange to you, call our hotline and ask us. Reach out to us. The person on the phone may not be able to get you an answer to that question right at that particular moment, but we have access to the people who can answer your question, and we will get you that answer, we will get you that information, and then we will add your question to our FAQ. So when your neighbor or person across town has the same question, you've already helped them by getting us that question, allowing us the time to get that answer and putting it out into the community. I think, you know, one of the scariest parts of this is the misinformation and misunderstandings that take place, and we want to do everything we can to help make sure that you have the best and most up-to-date information possible. And I can tell you so far, within just a matter of minutes or hours, if you hadn't had the information available to you through our website and our tools, it's because we didn't have the information yet either. So we're in the mode of trying to get as much information from the state, the county, the federal government out to you so that you can have informed conversations and make informed decisions about your own personal health and safety as we move forward. We're gonna get through this as a community, absolutely, positively. Just be patient and hang on.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you and Tara for your leadership and every member of our staff that's in this room. I know you folks have been you've been here 12, 14, 16 hours a day. That has not gone unnoticed. Deeply grateful to the community. As Jeff says, we know it's not over. We have lots of things to do, but I am so grateful that we have a staff that we do. We've got incredibly able and competent public safety officials, and we are deeply appreciative of that. And I know that we'll just continue to work through this with state, county, and federal officials, and we'll come out the other end. So with that, we're adjourned.